Hey there, how there, ho there. It's Jeff Cutter down and welcome you to yet another Cutter Top 10 NHL video. And today we're going to be honoring the Montreal Canadiens as they have slayed the dragon and taken out the Tampa Bay Lightning and have faced the Buffalo Sabres in round 2 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So, well, I have Montreal over Buffalo. I mean, Buffalo is okay and all that, but Montreal, come on, all the Canadian fans are going to be wanting Montreal to win, especially Leaf fans. Well, some Leaf fans don't. It's one, two. But anyway, we're going to take a look at the top 10 Montreal Canadiens players of all time, as I did the moments of all time on Sunday. So we're going to have some fun, and let's see what we can do here. All right, so here we go. Number 10 on the list is Yvan Cournoyer, the Roadrunner. Me. Number 12 in your programs. Yvan Cournoyer was a decent player and all that, a speedy winger, a respected captain, and a key contributor to the 1970s dynasty. He was pretty good and all that. He wasn't as well known as his contemporaries like Lafleur or Steve Shutt or Larry Robinson or Serge Savard or even Ken Dryden. Ken Dryden actually should be technically on this list in a sense. Like, it's not fair that my research says that he's not in the top 10. But I think, yeah, Ken Dryden should be top 10 by proxy because goaltending, there's two. But yeah, Ken Dryden should be number 10. But to the LTL, too little, too late. So anyway, Yvan Cournoyer is the guy, and he retired in the middle of 1979. So anyway, he retired just before the Stanley Cup finals were happening. So I don't know if you got a ring or not. But it doesn't really matter. Does it? Number 9 is a man former player from Kitchener. That's right, Kitchener Ranger icon Larry Robinson, part of the Big Three defensively with Serge Savard and Guy Laplante. Savard's on this list, but not point two. Larry Robinson was a reliable defenseman, first round pick from the Kitchener Rangers in the 1971 draft. It was pretty impressive and all that. He was known for his consistency, playoff performances, and lots of things. Robinson made an impact in 1976. So in 1976 in the finals against, who was the guy? I would say Dornhofer. I think it was Gary Dornhofer. He smashed a flyer into the board so much it dented the boards, and they had to delay the game for like 15 minutes. But yeah, Larry Robinson's hit on the Broad Street Bullies actually pushed the Bullies around. Robinson scored a famous end-to-end goal in 1978 in the finals against Boston. I think it was game 2 when he did all that. Robinson was great in all that. Rarely played with a helmet. I think he played with his helmet in the mid-'80s for the Habitants. But anyway, Robinson was around the Habs till 1989. He played in that famous 1989 final against the Flames, and he was great in all that, winning a few rings along the way. He went to LA, spent 3 years with Gretzky, and put up the most playoff appearances till Chris Chelios broke that mark. Not with the Habs, of course. Number 8 is my man, the man that I have the jersey for. The reason why I have the jersey is this guy. As I got to point it up there. Yes, that's him. Number 33 in your programs. That's why I have the Canadian jersey in the first place. Well, that and Bill Lang gave it to me because it's Patrick Roy, my idol. Although I must say Patrick Roy is a better goalie for Colorado. I mean, what Colorado goalie can beat Patrick Roy in stuff is for Abisher. Probably not even Abisher. But Patrick Roy to me is a great goalie. But let's not forget that in his 11 years with the Habs, he did quite well. He was drafted 51st overall in 1984. And then in 1986, he was in a 3-goalie battle for the number 1 spot with Doug Soltart and Steve Penny and won out. Shut down Boston in the first round of the 86 playoffs. Took care of Hartford in 7 games. And then took care of the Rangers in 5 games. That conference final was amazing because game 3 at MSG put up many overtime saves before Claude Lemieux scored the goal to win the game for the Habs. And then in the finals against Calgary, he proved himself worthy of winning the Conn Smythe Trophy for playoff MVP. He was a rookie at that time. Too bad he wasn't Rookie of the Year. That was Gary Sutter, if memory serves me right. Anyhow, Waugh did well in 1989. He led the Habs to the Stanley Cup Finals against Calgary, but Calgary got revenge, and Lenny McDonald scoring a famous goal on Patrick Waugh. Waugh was Waugh beaten on home ice, or did he lose a few games on home ice? 1989, can't remember. Anyway, Patty Waugh was there. However, 93 things were looking sour. Jacques Demers was in net. Was it the goalie after Pat Burns was dumped off for his defensive first approach that didn't prove offensively? Patrick Waugh did well in 93, and then he was down 0-2 in the playoffs to Quebec, and it looked like Waugh was going to be replaced by Andre Red Light Rasico. Sadly, though, for those descenders, Jacques Demers said that Patrick Waugh got them to the playoffs, and he'll lead them through the playoffs, called hell or high water. And Waugh rewarded his coach's experience by getting 10 overtime wins, as Montreal would take care of Quebec in 6 games, sweep Buffalo, took care of the Honors in 5, and then took out Wayne Gretzky and the Kings in 5, even though that Ray McSorley stick was just awful. But that's the way it goes. So anyway, Patrick Waugh did his job, and then Demers was replaced after an 0-5 start by Mario Tremblay, who made some kind of bad English and all that, trying to tell them to play with Toronto, to go toe to toe, not toes to toes. And Patrick Waugh laughed and all that. Patrick Waugh unfortunately had troubles with Tremblay going back to their playing days, and then December 2nd, 1995 happened, and we all know about that, giving up 9 goals when he should have been yanked after the first period for Patrick Blonsky. Waugh said that was it. He was done in Montreal, and then he went to Colorado, and the Habs fans basically ruled to regret it. Number 7 is Doug Harvey. You'll be thinking, who the hell's Doug Harvey? Well, if you're a hockey fan who knows your stuff from the 1950s and 60s, you smacked the youngster outside the head. But the fact of the matter is that Doug Harvey was a great defenseman for the Montreal Canadiens, winning 7 Norris trophies as a member of the Montreal Canadiens. The Norris Trophy is the for defenseman of the year. So anyways, so Doug Harvey won 7 Norris trophies for best defenseman and all that. He was great for Montreal, but then they decided to trade him to the Rangers. I believe this was before the Jacques Plante trade, but yeah, Doug Harvey was traded to the Rangers. He won the Norris for the New York Rangers and basically made Montreal really regret it. But Doug Harvey did have alcoholism. He had a lot of problems in him. He did manage to get into the Hall of Fame in 1985 or something? Or what? Well, he got into the Hall of Fame, I think in the 70s, and then he refused to go. So yeah, Doug Harvey would die of alcoholism 3 years later. But yeah, he was a great defenseman. Number 2 in your programs. Number 6 is another defenseman. His name is Serge Savard. Now, Serge Savard may not look like he had the best defensive stats as a defenseman, but it's what he did off the ice that's actually why he's jumped up some points. Good boy. Serge Savard was a good defenseman, part of the big 3 with Robinson and Lapointe. He was decent. The Senator, as they call him, he ended his career with the Jets, where in fact he should have stayed with the Habs. But it was his front office stuff that's made him big. I mean, Serge Savard was in the Montreal front office in 1986 and 93 when they won the Cups. And he knew what to do with everything. He was a good front office guy, even though that, he was dumped off for Rajon Peanut Houle, as they call him. They call him Rajon Houle Peanut. But yeah, Serge Savard had a few titles to his name, and even though that he was in trouble, that he didn't want to come back to the Forum for the farewell ceremony, he decided to do so. Number 5 is the Pocket Rocket, Henri Richard. Main reason why he's in the top 5 is for his longevity and how many cups he won as a player. Henri Richard is the younger brother of Rocket Richard, who is on this list, and we'll talk about him later. But anyway, Henri Richard was a good player number 16 in your programs. You know, he got out of his big brother shadow in 1960 once Rocket Richard retired. And Henri knew what to do as a player. In the 1960s, he was the hero in 1966, winning the cup for the Habs against the Red Wings with the cup winning goal, although some say it was controversial. In 1971, he had problems with Alan McNeil because McNeil became the coach and he was having issues with Pocket Richard. Worst of all, Richard was benched a few times during the playoffs, and the fans went nuts. Well, the French Canadian fans went nuts. Even English Canadian fans had to go bonkers. But yeah, Henri Richard had the problems with Al McNeil. McNeil was basically done for after the 71 Cup run. And they was that when Scotty Bowman came in? I think that's when Scotty came in. But yeah, Henri Richard did last in 1975. He did well, winning 11 cups as a player. 11, can you imagine? That's like Bill Russell. When Bill Russell won 11 NBA titles as a player. Of course, Boston had that dynasty in the 1950s and 60s. Number 4 is Jacques Plante, the best goalie in Montreal Canadiens history. Revolutionary goalie and 6-time Stanley Cup winner. Jacques Plante was a bit of a flake. You can call it what you want. A loony bin or eccentric. I've been called that. So I can relate. So anyway, Jacques Plante was a good goalie for the Habitants. He was number 1 in everyone's hopes. He supplanted Jerry McNeil for that job. He even knitted toques and woodwork a toque in net while he was playing junior, but in the NHL, that's a no-no. He was known for being kind of what they call the third defenseman, something that Martin Brodeur would grow up to do. But yeah, Jacques Plante would stray out of his net and poke check and, play the puck behind the net, play the puck outside the crease and all that. And a lot of people were shocked, saying that Plante's going to get himself into deep trouble, but not really. So anyway, Jacques Plante did his job winning 6 Stanley Cups with the Habs in the 50s. Of course, the 5-time champs from 1956 to 1960. He was one of 12 players to win all 5 Stanley Cups and all that. So anyway, Jacques Plante was good. And then in 1962, he actually was traded to the New York Rangers. He wanted to get away. One of his major eccentricities was that he had to stay at a different hotel in Toronto as his team because the team that they stayed in, he was asthmatic and all that. But a lot of people said he was a flake. Joe Blake was driven crazy by this guy. So Jacques Plante did play for the Rangers. He did have a 3-year sabbatical and then came back with the Cardinals, of course, the St. Louis Blues, and then came back with the Leafs. Did you know Jacques Plante was a Toronto Maple Leaf? I bet you did not know that. Fortunately, though, he's the only one on this list who was a Toronto Maple Leaf at one point or another. But yeah, Jacques Plante couldn't save the Leafs to save his life. Of course, as a Leaf fan, I hate that. All right. Number 3 is the flower, Guy Lafleur, because fleur, F-L-E-U-R, is French for flower. I should know that. I have grade 9 French experience. Nevertheless, Guy Lafleur did his job. And the way he was drafted by the Habs was something of a big thing. 1971, him and his Quebec Ramparts were facing off against St. Catharines and Marcel Dion in a massive Memorial Cup thing. Now, the Memorial Cup at the time in 1971 had the Eastern champs against the Western champions. So, yeah, Quebec had to play St. Catharines in a battle. St. Catharines, unfortunately, forfeited because the Quebec crowd was just too loud and too much. But anyway, Guy Lafleur was slated to be the number 1 draft pick for 1971. Who had the number 1 pick? The California Golden Seals. You'll be thinking, well, geez, Lafleur slipped out of the one slot. Who did the Golden Seals take at number 1? How about nobody? Because the previous year, the Habs traded away Francis Lacombe, a defenseman, to California for their first-round pick. The Golden Seals thought they might as well just get the prospect. They don't need prospects. So anyway, the Habs were sitting on the first-round pick. One tiny problem, though. At the All-Star break, the Seals were not the worst team in the NHL. They were the second worst team. So practically, the Kings would have the number 1 draft pick, and the Seals would have the number 2 pick. Meaning that Montreal would have the number 2 pick. So they smartly traded away Ralph Backstrom to LA, who was a veteran who wanted to go on the West Coast. And Backstrom helped the Kings overtake the Seals in the standings, and the Seals were number one worst team in the NHL, which meant, unfortunately, that they had to give up that draft pick to the Montreal Canadiens, and that's how Guy Lafleur became a Montreal Canadien. Marcel Dion went second overall to Detroit, but then soon found luck with the LA Kings. But anyway, Guy Lafleur, everyone knows about his blonde hair flowing as he refused to wear a helmet. The problem was the first 3 seasons he actually wore a helmet. But unfortunately, he didn't like it. He didn't like the feel, so he's like, "Screw it! I'm going to take the helmet off because you didn't have to wear a helmet and all that. It was not mandatory. It was voluntary, if you will." But Guy Lafleur, with all those 50-goal seasons and 500 goals as a Canadian and all that, and 1979 sinking Boston in the semifinals, the Cup semifinals, giving them another cup. So Guy Lafleur did his job. I think he was the cup-winning goal in '78 was Guy Lafleur, but it wasn't overtime, but it was just normal. Anyway, Guy Lafleur was great, and then by 1984 he had slowed down a step or two. Montreal just basically didn't like him, and he was put down on the third line. Lafleur finally had enough. In November '84, he decided to retire. He went to the Montreal front office, but got bored of his job and wanted to go back into hockey. So strange as it sounded, the New York Rangers in 1988 picked him up as a player. So he skated with the Rangers in '88, '89. And of course, his comeback game at the Forum, February 3rd, 19, or was it 5th? I think it was February 5th, 1989. He scored 2 goals, making Dick Irvin Jr., who did the Habs games for Hockey Night in Canada, exclaim, "What a night for the Flower!" The Rangers were up 5-1 and choked it, losing 7-5. Guy Lafleur would play his final 2 seasons with the Quebec Nordiques, his hometown team and all that. He deserved to play for the Nordiques, even though they were shit. But yeah, Guy Lafleur, great player. Number 2 is Rocket Richard. Maurice Rocket Richard, if you will. He was a French-Canadian icon and all that. In 1942, he was drafted. He wasn't drafted. The draft didn't happen until 1963. He was picked up by the Habs, and then he wore number 16, and then decided to change his number to number 9 because of his daughter Huguette's birth. And that helped him out. Rocket Richard actually was a slow starter to the NHL career, but then, he picked up the pace, and by 1945, he was big. He scored 50 goals in 50 games, and people were shocked. It would take till 1981 before someone else did that mark. So yeah, Rocket Richard did his job, and he was a good Montreal player, and the French Canadiens liked him because he was one of them. Unfortunately, Rocket Richard had a massive temper and all that. He had fire in his eyes, and he did a lot of things on and off the ice. 1955, he attacked Hal Laycoe, a defenseman for the Bruins, and then actually swung at lineman Cliff Thompson, knocking him out. Rocket Richard would be banned for the rest of the regular season and the playoffs. And wouldn't you know it, the next day, on St. Patrick's Day, 1955, Red Wings were going to Montreal, As the Forum basically had a pre-game riot. Clarence Campbell, the commissioner, he was president, but kind of a commissioner role, he did something stupid. He decided to come to the game trying to prove to people that he will not be hurt. Unfortunately, the fans started to hurt him, and then a gas tear bomb broke out, and the Habs lost the game to the Red Wings. Anyway, Rocket Richard went on the radio in both English and French, and TV as well, to calm the fans down after a massive riot. This riot actually started what they call the Quiet Revolution in French Canada, because all the major networks like Sun Life, Bank of Montreal, TD, and the NHL offices were in Montreal, but they were English prominent. By 1977, with René Lévesque in office as premier for the Parti Québécois, he made French number 1 language priority, and all those things like Sun Life and Bank of Montreal moved tail to Toronto because they couldn't deal with the French language laws. But yeah, Rocket Richard was a hero to the French Canadiens everywhere, and you just can't beat that. And finally, number 1 is Jean Beliveau. Gentleman Jean Beliveau, if you will. Legendary captain and center, known for his leadership and skill on and off the ice. He was a good player. He played for the Quebec Senior League. He actually didn't want to leave the Quebec Senior League, saying that he made tons of money playing for them more so than Montreal. He had a good deal and all that, so the Canadians knew they had to sign him. So what did they do? They kind of bought the Quebec Senior League for themselves. So practically now a lot of those players were Montreal property or something like that. And then finally, Frank Selke Sr. opened the vault of the form and says, Sean, take what you want. And Beliveau kind of did. And then he became a Montreal Canadian, and he was a great player. No disrespect to Rocket Richard. He was good too, but Sean Beliveau played the game, the calm influence, basically the yin to the yang of Rocket Richard. He was calm, he was cool, collective. He could speak English quite well. And John Beliveau led the Habs in the quiet revolution of the 1960s, if you will, for 13. So he did well. In 1971, he retired after winning the Stanley Cup for the last time. It was amazing. 500 goals in his campaign as a Hab. Never played for another team. That was great. Beliveau would move into the Montreal front office and was an ambassador, great guy. He nearly became our governor general, or in layman's terms, the representative of the Queen, because Canada is part of the Commonwealth, where we kind of pay some services to the King. Well, it was the Queen. Now we got a king because of King Charles. So practically, he was going to be Canada's royal representative, if you will. But he turned that down. Beliveau was an iconic player and all that. You see him at Montreal functions, and his quiet charm just charmed everyone off in Montreal. But that's the way it goes in Montreal. I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.